Hello, I'm Vihanga Gamage and I'm presenting data-driven reinforcement learning for virtual character animation control. My co-authors on this paper are Dr. Cathy Ennis and Dr. Robert Ross. Virtual character animation control is a problem domain of great interest because engaging realistic virtual characters can be a very effective medium of interactions in games and a number of applications. In early work where neural networks were applied for data-driven character animation, supervised learning was used to create agents to output a varied range of animations based on a collection of motion clips that were used as training data. But the agents trained using these approaches rely heavily on the training set, so there isn't much flexibility that you could obtain. Therefore, recently, reinforcement learning has been explored as an approach to address this issue. Physics-based simulation have been used successfully in conjunction with model-free reinforcement learning to implement character animation agents such as deep mimic. These approaches have been shown to successfully be implemented to portray a variety of physics-based skills. But these methods rely heavily on interactions with physical objects and surfaces, because to train agents, feedback signals would need to be obtained from the physics engine. So if you consider social behaviors such as conversational gestures, nods, exclamation, pointing, waving, these kinds of behaviors wouldn't elicit robust physics signals because they don't involve any interactions with physical surfaces or objects or any other items in the environment. So in this paper, we introduce RL Animate, which is a data-driven reinforcement learning-based approach for character animation, which allows for agents to be trained to portray realistic human-like behaviors. These are the main contributions from our work. We present a novel mathematical structure for modeling character animation. This splits the information to a objective signal that is specific to the behavior to be portrayed, and a description signal that is valid that informs the agent of the current state of the character model. Leveraging the characteristics of this configuration for presenting information to the agent, we are able to train an efficient latent dynamics model. The model is capable of disentangling the dynamics concerning the objective and the behavior that is to be portrayed, and learns a sort of globally valid task agnostic version of the animation dynamics involved in sort of actuating that behavior portrayal. And we implement a mechanism that allows for a limited set of motion data to be used to inform the training process of representations for valid behavior portrayal. Typically, reinforcement learning agents function in an environment governed by a Markov decision process. In a Markov decision process, at each time step, an agent is given a state observation that describes the state of the environment. And given this state observation, the agent takes an action. And the state transition function of a Markov decision process determines what the state is going to be at the next time step, given a particular state and action pair. And the reward term assigns a reward value depending on that state transition, ascertaining whether it led to a preferable transition. And an ideal policy for reinforcement learning agent would allow it to generate actions given a state observation, maximizing the cumulative reward generated over an episode. And the Markovian property essentially states that the future of the environment only needs to depend on the present, not the past. That is to say that to determine the next state, all the information needed would be in the current state, and the only other variable you'd need is the action. A key idea behind our approach is that a Markov decision process might not be necessarily applicable for character animation. So typically, RL agents are trained to maximize the cumulative reward. But for animation, for a proper realistic human-like behavior sequence, every single action at every single time step of the trajectory would need to be optimal. And for character animation, we propose the use of model-based reinforcement learning to address these issues. Uh, we construct a state observation space that splits the information provided to the agent into an objective signal and a description signal. The objective signal informs the agent of the behavior that the agent needs to be portraying, and the description it's essential information to the agent of the current state of the character model. So the character model is where the animation is applied to. And we can summarize our training objective as maximizing an idealness measure, which considers every animation taken through the sequence up until the current frame and the animation that the agent needs to output at the present frame, given an objective and description signal. This figure is an overview of our approach. To train agents, we generate episode rollouts where the agent is imitating emotion from the clip set that's provided. The environment provides an input to the agent via an objective signal, and the agent applies the models and dynamics it learns to generate an animation signal, which is applied to the character model in the environment, and the environment generates a real description signal after the animation is applied, and the animation, the real description signal, the objective signal, and the ideal animation per the motion clip is added to the sample buffer. For the work presented in this paper, we use waving and pointing behaviors to explore our approach. This table, it shows the construction of the objective signal. And the description signal, well, it's essentially a description of the character model at any given time frame. So it involves the joint positions for the collar, shoulder, elbow, wrist, and index finger positions, and also the effector vectors, which in this case are the vectors of the left and right eye and the index finger. So the first step of the agent involves the portrayal model. This model, it takes the objective that's input to the agent, and it guesses what the ideal description for the next pose should be given said objective signal. The role of the behavior model is to capture in a latent space the dynamics concerning the behavior being portrayed and the animation required to portray these behaviors. The latent dynamics space is split into two components: the deterministic task state H and the probabilistic behavior state B. The behavior state is the component that captures the stochastic dynamics, and these dynamics are modeled as normally distributed, and the behavior state vector is generated by applying the learned dynamics to the deterministic hidden task state and the current animation pose. The deterministic task state, it captures the dynamics related to the objective state. So the objective state vector containing information on the behavior it's supposed to be portraying, which kind of behavior it is, which frame of the overall episode sequence the current time step is, and the information considering for pointing the target vector and for the waving, the degree of exaggeration that needs to be portrayed. And because the task state captures the dynamics related to the objective state, and by extension the behavior it's supposed to be portraying specifically, the dynamics learned to update the behavior state vector, we consider that they learn universally applicable information on animation. And rather than compute the hidden behavior state directly, we infer a behavior posterior state using an encoder, using the predicted behavior provided by the portrayal model. And this behavior state posterior can be considered as a representation of the most realistic animation poses for the next given step. And the animation model, it outputs the animation action for the time step calculated using the latent task and behavior vectors generated by the behavior model. The animation action space is parameterized as a beta distribution, and the character model joints are rotated to apply the animation in the environment, and the environment records the real description after the action is applied. RL animate agents are trained by generating rollout episodes, where for each episode, agents are asked to imitate the motion capture clips, and they're provided the input through the objective vectors fed in. And when being trained, batches of rollout samples saved are drawn from the sample buffer to calculate losses and update the model parameters. And this is our overall training objective. And these are the three loss components. Um, L1 is the component involved with the description construction. This term calculates a loss concerning whether the description generated by the objective model for a given time step, whether it's accurate with regards to the real description recorded after the animation is applied. And L2 is the KL regularization component loss, calculated based on the difference between the prior and posterior distributions of the behavior model. So what I would like to note is that the L1 and L2 losses, they're concerned with learning the dynamics for behavior and animation. These terms aren't directly concerned with whether the animation or description is accurate in terms of portraying valid behaviors. They just shape the model parameters such that they're able to predict the description for an action taken accurately, and to learn the dynamics to be able to predict along the different trajectories of animation available to the agent. And L3 is a Hubel loss function which compares the output animation from the agent to the ideal animation per the motion clip. And these losses are what informs agent of which of the different trajectories it's able to consider through the dynamics learned, which of those trajectories are the most optimal ones in terms of portraying human-like behavior according to the objective vector input. For the experiments carried out, we gathered using Adobe Mixamo a total of 100 motion clips, and of these 100 motion clips, we held back 10 as a test set to be used for evaluation. And using this test set, we measured a metric to ascertain whether the behavior portrayed was successful, calculating between the differences between the joint positions played, comparing the agent output to the motion reference clips. Our main control agents were selected to isolate the effects of the use of a objective description vector split for the environment observation, and the dual latent dynamics learned by the behavior model. And we also trained a supervised learning based control agent. Our animate agents were able to reach a high score quite early in the training cycle, and they optimized from there as the agents encountered different motion sequences and expanded its understanding of the dynamics. And the performance was consistent between imitating motion clips from the training set and the unseen test set motion clips. The agent that trained a simpler dynamics model, it was relatively competitive when trying to portray behaviors in a single behavior mode, particularly when imitating the clips already seen during training. But their performance was quite poor when imitating the test set clips. This agent also showed some very unstable training. This is likely because the simpler latent dynamics model doesn't equip the agent well enough to disentangle the dynamics involved efficiently. And this instability becomes less significant when pointing is involved. We think this is likely because the dynamics involved for the pointing can be distinguished in a clearer way given the target vector. And for the state observation control, the self-description was eliminated with just the objective state used as a single input. And the behavior state is now conditioned on the current description of the character model. And this agent had a lot of artifacts in the form of shakiness. In this paper, we presented an approach for model-based animation control agents capable of portraying human-like behavior called RL Animate. RL Animate agents, they learn a model to self-generate descriptions from an objective signal and learn an advanced dynamics model that maintains latent representations used to obtain animation sequences portraying natural human behavior. In our future work, we plan to ascertain the impact of these small artifacts that occur, how they affect the human perception of agent output animation. And we also plan to examine how RL Animate can be applied to generate animation portraying a wider range of behaviors, particularly complex portrayal of beat gestures and other conversational gestures required to interact with the user.